So I've gotten several requests for creating a David Gilmour type of preset on the Quad Cortex. And frankly, this is one I've always been a little hesitant about just because his tones are so iconic. And combined with the fact that I'm not the biggest Pink Floyd fan, I didn't know if I really felt qualified to try to recreate this. But I got enough requests for it. I figured I'd take a shot at it. And so what we have here is a preset that's not aiming to get any specific tone from a specific song. But what I'm trying to do is kind of generally create his rig and some of the key pieces of that and try to see if we can get the tone into that kind of ballpark of the David Gilmour sound. So right now I'm running in stop mode. What we're going to do is we're going to run through the setup of the preset, and I'm going to talk about some of the choices I made and why I made them. And then we can switch over to scene mode and check out some of the scenes that I've got. Let's start with the amps. So David Gilmour is pretty famous for playing high watt amps. I figured we'll stick with the high watts. And so I looked into, do we want to use the bright or the normal? And I couldn't find any good information about what would be the best to use for him. I tried both out. Neither one was exactly what I was looking for. And so what I ended up doing was actually just combining them. What you'll see here is I have it split, and we're just doing a regular normal split. So I'm not doing a left-right stereo effect. In fact, if you look at the mix, I'm only panning them a little bit left and right, just about 15. So that's just to get a little bit of spread, but I don't want a full kind of one amp to one side and one amp to the other because they do sound different. And part of the point is to combine these amps together to get the tone that we want. I've got the bright here. The gain's a little higher on the brights, obviously a little more bass and mids and less presence on the bright side. And then on the normal, I've got the gain back a little bit, and I pulled the bass back a little bit and adding a little more treble and presence. And then both of them are running through a single mono IR that's a Marshall 4x12. And they are slightly different IRs. Both of these are from the free pack that comes with Amalgam. So you can go to their website and grab these if they don't come through on the preset. But again, the high watt into the Marshall cabinets is, I think, kind of a good base for his tone. And so these amps have a lot of headroom. They're not breaking up very much at all. And that's where we are. I am running those through a legendary 87 stereo compressor here. Again, I'm doing this just to give a little bit of sag to the amp, so when we're kicking the front with a lot of the drive pedals that he uses, that the volumes are kind of staying consistent, and we can get a little bit of kind of control from the guitar volume in order to get the different sounds that we might want to. And then in terms of ambience, I've got a digital delay, mixes at 27.5%, feedback's at 40%. And then I've got the delay time set to 380. So just a good standard kind of stereo delay. And then on the back end, we've got a hall reverb, pretty much just kind of the standard settings. And on the front end, we've got a compressor here. Now, he's pretty famous for using both the Dynacomp and the CS3. We don't have a Dynacomp compressor on the Quad Cortex, so I'm using the Jewel on the front end for the clean. And then we can also combine that with the CS3, which is something that I've read that he used to do in terms of combining two compressors in order to kind of get a real kind of clean sustain. But the main clean tone is just using the Jewel on the front end. So here's the Jewel into the high watts with the delay and reverb. So good kind of bass clean tone for us to use with all the different pedals that we're going to put in the front. So like I said, you can also kick that with the other compressor just to get kind of a boost and some more compression. And so this is nice for kind of clean leads. You can get a nice sustain to it without having to kick it with a drive pedal. That's kind of the first variation, is to add that extra compressor in. You have to be careful because that much compression, you can start to get a lot of noise, but it kind of really kicks the tone and makes it sustain really well. And then if you want, you can do like a phaser on top of that just to get a real affected tone. into the drives. And so there's kind of two main drives that are associated with David Gilmour. One is the Big Muff Pi, which the Quad Cortex has, but I don't think it sounds quite right in terms of sounding like he used it. The other is the BK Butler tube driver. So let's start with the Fuzz, and I'll talk about kind of what I did here. So like I said, he was using the Fuzz Pi. So I've got that here, and we'll turn it on. So one of the things that I've seen about him using the Fuzz is he really doesn't turn up the sustain really high. It's kind of more of a lower level fuzz. It's kind of more in the 3 to 4 range. But I find the fuzz on the Quad Cortex is like, has way too much gain on it, I think, for that tone. So even with the sustain all the way off. It doesn't sound bad, but I don't think it's perfectly right for that kind of lower amount of gain fuzz that I think he used. It also doesn't do well kind of boosting things in front of it. So the alternative I came up with is actually using this Vimero Ray. And this isn't a fuzz pedal, but I found when you turn it up, it starts to sound a little bit like a fuzz. And it does really well with kicking with a boost in front of it. So for me, I like using the Vimero Ray. You can use the Fuzz Pi. For me, it's just not quite right. And maybe it's because I'm not generally a fuzz kind of player, but it's here if you want to use it. And then in front of that, he's very well known for using the BK Butler tube driver. And I found this capture on the Cortex Cloud. It's a nice capture of the tube driver in kind of a boost mode that Gilmour would use. And so if you put that on its own, it's a nice low gain tone. Maybe if you even hit with the extra compressor. But it also works really well into the kind of the fuzz kind of tone. So if I put that in front of the Vimero Ray, I think that's a pretty good approximation of kind of a nice Gilmourish lead tone. We can put that in front of the fuzz. I mean, it's not bad, but I like the Vimero Ray better. The other option I like using instead of the tube driver is actually the obsessive drive. And one of the reasons I kind of swapped these two in and out is I actually had a BK Butler tube driver for a long time, kind of in my quest for that Eric Johnson kind of sound. And while I had it, I also purchased a OCD overdrive pedal. And when I played around with it, the first thing I thought was like, it sounds a lot like the tube driver. And so I think the obsessive drive can kind of, in a low setting, can give you a little bit of that tube driver boost. So we can kick it with the other. And then we can put that in front of the fuzz. Or in front front of the remote array. And by the way, I'm using a Strat style guitar here today, obviously, to kind of do these David Gilmour kind of tones. And then beyond those, I've got a couple kind of modulation effects on the back end. One is a flanger, mixed pretty high, but not a lot of speed. And this is nice that you're doing a so a nice kind of low-level flange, just atmospheric kind of thing. And then you could put that in front of a lead tone. Or you can use, I've got a chorus here as well. So again, mix pretty high, rate and depth kind of moderate, a good amount of width though. So it kind of adds that modulation to some of those drive sounds that he would use. So those are the components that kind of I pulled in to kind of mimic some of the tones. In terms of the scenes, what I ended up doing was, obviously we have our clean, which is just the Joule compressor into the high watts. And we can do the extra compression. We can do kind of our clean kind of phaser sounds. You see the speed on the phaser is a little high. So it's a pretty prevalent effect. And then we've got our just kind of tube driver low gain sound. We've got what I'm calling fuzzy rhythm, which is I'm using the remote array here, but this is just. And then we can flange on top of that. We've got a chorusy lead. I'm using the tube driver into the remote array. And then lastly, I've got what I'm calling a compressor lead, where I'm putting the second compressor on into the tube driver, into the remote array. You can hear there's a lot of noise on this one just because of all the compression on the front. You can hear how much sustain that has. So that's my take on a David Gilmour-ish kind of preset. For the scenes, I made some certain choices in terms of which of the drive options that I liked best, but you can obviously try this preset yourself and see maybe you like the Fuzz Pi better, maybe you like the obsessive drive, maybe not. I think there's a lot of good options here. There's a lot of things you can do in terms of just combining these different effects. And I think that's a lot about how he got his tone, was just combining all these different pedals. I mean, you can do crazy stuff like turn on this, and this, and this, and this, and give it a chorus, and just get some crazy kind of thick lead tones. everything on and see how it sounds. Actually, all these things kind of go well together. And so that's one of the great things about this setup with the high watts, is because the high watts, and I don't mean this in a bad way, are kind of a blank canvas. And you can do a lot of things in front of it and still make it work. So you can combine all these different drive pedals with the modulations and the compressors, and it all work together and just kind of build on each other. So feel free to play around with that and see what you get. As always, I'll make this preset available on my Cortex Cloud account. Grab it, download it, let me know what you think in the comments below, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching.